Yes, so I have a first question which was really very close to the last thing you said. You mentioned the 5 famous communities in the Vedic period.
Yeah.
What are those? I don't know.
Basically, the word used for these 5 communities, Pancha-Krishti. Pancha is 5 and Krishti is who cultivated the soil, and therefore they were always known as different Vedic names for these Pancha-Krishti, the 5 famous communities.
Okay. And what did they have names like 5 names for them?
Actually, different names refer to different. There is no opinion about these 5 communities.
Okay.
Sometimes they are explained as the different dynasties. Yadu, Turvasu, Druyu, Anu, etc. Sometimes they are described as human beings, Gandharvas, Apsaras, etc.
Okay. Thank you. Because for me it was only relating to the 4 Varnas, and then you said 5 communities, so I was just trying to relate that.
I have one question. So basically, when we say Vedic period, Vedas also include the Upanishads as well, right? Wherein the Upanishads talk about this abstract Brahma concept as well. So then, when we say the gods, when we include the Vedic gods, do we also include those gods as well?
Difference between the concept of God of the Vedic Samhitas. See the slow evolution of the thought process of the Vedic people. In the gods which I mentioned in my slides, they are the gods who were worshipped in the Vedic Samhitas in the Brahmana texts times. But slowly the Vedic people started looking inwards, and in the Upanishads we find the famous concept of Atma, Tattva, and they start asking themselves, Koham, who am I, and from where I have come here. And therefore the gods like Indra or Vishnu are also mentioned in the Upanishads, but you can see the importance given to them, or the yajnas performed for them. The quantity of those yajnas had lessened during the Upanishad times. So technically speaking, yes, the same gods are mentioned in the Upanishads, but there is a new entry of the concept of the ultimate principle, the Tattva or the Atma or the Paramatman, the Brahman in the Upanishads.
So then the Vedic gods, then they do include the Upanishadic gods as well.
Yes, they are mentioned in the I hope I have not talked something which is beyond, which was extremely boring and something
No,
like
no,
that.
no. It was not boring. It was actually, I was really, you are guiding us very, very well, because these are the things we were, rather I was afraid to read Rigved and Yajurved, because, that is Sanskrit, that is way beyond my, school days, and also Sanskrit was not my forte and things like that. But you have made it so easily and easy and understandable. I could understand so many things. So let me think about it and get back to you definitely.
Yeah, I think looking at so much of information and knowledge, but still understandable that it was really fun to listen, Mugdha. I have not
Yes,
had a opportunity to hear something like this. It's wonderful. Yeah, very pleasing.
So Mugdha, one question I have out of curiosity is, you said Ganapati is not mentioned as a Vedic god, right? So, but I'm just curious, we keep listening to this Ganapati Atharva Shirsha, which supposedly from the Atharva way. So, like, where is that coming from?
Partially what you said is partially true, because the Atharva Shirsha are the mantras which certainly belong to the Atharva Veda. But if you carefully read these, you don't find the word, the various names given to Ganapati. Ganapati, the word literally means the master, pati, of Ganas, of various groups. So it can be anyone. It is not necessarily the god Ganapati, the god Ganapati whom we worship in present days, with the face of elephant and with the big ears and Lambodara, Ekadanta, etc., etc. So that description does not belong to the Atharva Veda. Some mantras are taken from Atharva Veda, and then there was some addition to these mantras. And in the Atharva Veda also, we find these mantras dedicated to a god called Brahmanaspati. And this Brahmanaspati in the Vedic times was the god of knowledge. So slowly, when this Brahmanaspati came to the post-Vedic times, we equated Brahmanaspati with Ganapati, and both being together was or is worshipped as the god of knowledge.
Yeah, so actually for me, this was exactly the kind of thing I was wanting, just so you know. What happens is we have a lot of general opinions. I think I mentioned it already. One previous experience I had was Professor Vaidyanathan of IIM Bangalore, who spoke about finance the same way. Like everything you're telling is no opinion. There is a reference to it, and which gives, at least to me, some feeling like, we are not just saying because our grandmother said, as we normally talk, but really there is stuff in the Vedas, and then that has, transformed. And some of the things we may just not like Ganapati was not in the Vedic period. Okay, you're not there, can't help it.
I have one more question. Can I ask you one more question? In Veda, there were no Murti Puja. This is what I hear. Is it true?
Yes, absolutely true. I have discussed this in a few words. In the Vedas, you find long descriptions of Yajna, where the Agni, the sacred fire, was kindled and the offerings were given in the Yajna. They use a bad English translation for that. They call it burnt offerings, which I won't accept. We shall call it ahutis. So they put the ahutis in the sacred fires. Yes, they imagined that the gods are there who will receive this ahuti, this havir dravya. But I'm 100% sure, I can confidently tell you that the Vedas do not have the idol worship. There is no description of idols in the Vedas. The gods are there, their physical descriptions are there. But let me tell you, because the idols were not there, this physical description is also very limited.
I completely feel that, they were not gods. They were all the scientists who were working to make a good human being or a human life on this earth or something like that. And they were, you have to respect somebody. When you respect somebody, you say he's like a god. So, maybe that concept has come from there. And of course, they are worthy of worshipping, no doubt about it. But still, as they say, do you fear of a god? There is no fear, because, actually we have a respect for them. So,
but sometimes the respect does include fear. We can find some stanzas from the Vedas where we can see that they are slightly scared. For example, in the hymns of Varuna, they request Varuna that please do not discontinue our lives. So they were scared of Varuna. They wanted to see the next day. They wanted to see the next season. They wanted to see the next year. So there is a feeling of fear somewhere, surely.
Okay, okay.
So
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, like you mentioned that Brahma is in the post-Vedic period, but we call Brahma the creator of the world, right? So how does that happen?
We have a predecessor of the creator, Brahma, in the Vedic times, but he is not called Brahma. He is called Prajapati. Prajapati is the god in the Vedic literature, in the Vedic texts, who created the world, who created everything. However, interestingly, the description of Prajapati continued in the post Vedic times, but the name got changed.
I didn't know that, Prajapati was called Brahma in the later period. That was interesting.
There is a very, striking common features in Prajapati and Brahma.
It's interesting to see in the Vedic period all the forces of energy and the nature are worshipped or paid attention to, and they have been given some names. There are physical forces of nature, all the prapancha, like yeah. So all Panchabhutas, right? So each of them have the water as Varuna, Vayu, and all of them have the names because our physical existence is supported by these. And Bhumi, without Bhumi, nothing is nourished. So everything, food, sustain is coming from that. So and then, so these are the visible. And to pay respects and to appeal to the forces that are not visible, not not accessible to the sensory organs, then they are accessed through the Agni. That is where Yajna comes. Later, for people to be able to identify, because if you say abstract about that energy, super consciousness, then people, it is difficult to focus and relate to. And so the deity, the deity is basically, they are like human forms are given. Because they were the forces of nature, there is no human form. There is no he or she. When we talk about female and male, there is no, it's a nurturing portion of the energy is female. So nurturing part is the feminine aspect of the nature. And so all of those are the feminine aspect of it. And everyone has the both.
Could you hear that?
Yes, certainly. Most of it.
Okay.
I have one more observation.
Okay.
The thing is, I believe that Hindu religion or Sanatan Dharma or Vedic religion is a Vedic way of life, is completely science. So, this is yajna thing is, I don't know, I'm not very sure, but this is what I think, that it was observed for something. Like, for example, if you burn dried mango branches, mango tree branches, then all the viruses go. So, this is something related to science, and I don't think that is related to gods. They come down and do something about it. They made this yajna just to maybe do something for environment, or maybe something you concentrate on, mentally concentrate on, to be with the conscious or something like that. It is very it's very funny to think that gods come down, or Indra comes down and take his Havishanna or something like that. I think this is made to be with the environment, or clean the environment, or give something like from that Havishanna. The food was created for insects, on who can be more productive for the environment, or something like that. Maybe this is what I think, but I'm not sure. But this is what I think. This is something more science, and then this God, and
Whether it is more science or not is a point which needs more research. But let me tell you one thing for sure. We people belonging to the modern times are so harassed by the problems of pollution and similar things that we keep on thinking about the environmental cleaning. But when you read the Vedas, you realize that those people did not have any such problem in their lives. So there was no need of cleaning the air, and there was no pollution at all. So whether it was science or, as you said, whether it was done for mental concentration, that needs to be studied for sure. But I can certainly say that they did not have any environmental issues like us.
Wait for me.
Muddaji, I was asking because you were a professor of Sanskrit studies there. Sanskrit Bharati as an organization, also they are interacting and interfacing with HRD and various universities as well. In terms of bringing this language, Sanskrit, as a medium to access to the knowledge base, all the literature, and make it accessible for everyone. How is that playing? How is that happening in the universities where you are working and in the region?
At present, in the Pune University, in our department, we sometimes have some kind of discussions with the Sanskrit Bharati people. There is, if you know his name, Mr. Shirish Bedgaonkar is there, who is the chief of Sanskrit Bharati in Pune region, and he visits us sometimes. There are some ideas which can be implemented in our department. For example, we have some kind of workshops for our MAs and MA and research students, especially as you have the idea of spoken Sanskrit. But I take this opportunity to share with you that all these modern universities, we have a single department of Sanskrit, and especially in case of states like Maharashtra, we are not trained, even as teachers and then the students, we are not trained to study Sanskrit through Sanskrit. We are still following the method which was given to us by the Britishers. So we are studying Sanskrit through different languages, through different regional languages. So on that front, nothing much is done yet.
Okay. I think we will conclude. So Mugdha-ji, namaste.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
No.
It was a nice experience to share my thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Bye.